Coming up on More Than Before.
We need to reach out and connect with people that have nothing to give us. I want to just pour into you. I want to help you become the manager, even though you're not going to give me an extra cup of lemonade.
This is More Than Before with Nathan Cook.
Hey everyone, welcome back. My guest today is a voice that you most likely have heard at least at some point in your life if you've lived here in Portland, Oregon. He has over 44 years of radio broadcasting. He's received multiple awards such as the Roy Stevens Best Announcer, multiple American Music Awards, Billboard Radio Awards, and many, many more that can't even be counted, I would say. He is currently the operations manager at KBPS Radio Portland here in the Pacific Northwest, and he is also the owner of RBT Enterprises. He's a father of two amazing children, but you're a proud grandfather, let's just say that. And you're also a really proud dog father.
I am. I'm a doggy daddy.
So I'm really excited to have him on. You probably know him as Rick Bubba Taylor, but today we're going to get to know the man behind the mask. Rick Kinoshita, welcome to the program. How are you?
Thank you. I appreciate it. And that great opening there. You did forget one award that I'm very proud of, and it's the bowling trophy that I got when I was like 10 years old.
How did you get the bowling? Was this because this was probably before participation trophies?
It was bumpers. It's embarrassing, but I'm proud of the trophy.
Were there bumpers along the ball when you were given it?
and they brought that little rack out that you put the ball on and you push it. So I probably shouldn't have brought that up, and I don't blame you for not mentioning it in the intro.
Well, I love it too because it was probably during that era where you actually have to go out with a stick and pull up the bumpers. It wasn't these automatic bumpers that you kids have today. But I am so excited to have you on. We met a number of years ago, back in 2015. We were at a dinner together, and it was called Man Up. Mm-hmm. It was just a bunch of guys getting together, fellowshipping, getting to know one another, and sharing real life. Mm-hmm. And I always remember the questions, right? Because we had the softball question that was kind of you could knock it out of the park. And then you had the hardball question. And the hardball question was always something that would dig a little bit deeper into your life and actually reveal who you are. And so I'm gonna be asking you some hardball questions.
Okay.
Don't worry, I'll put them on the tee. It's a nice hardball. But I'm curious, now you grew up here in Oregon. Where did you grow up? And tell everyone a little bit, maybe what you're doing today right now.
I was born in Prineville, Oregon, but I was raised in Southeast Portland. Single mom, raised 7 kids. Spent most of my life here pretty much. I was born and raised here. My family lives here. My entire career was built in this lovely city. And the broadcasting world, it's kind of uncommon for someone to stay in their hometown, because there was a joke about radio people. It was like they do more moving than U-Haul and Beacons, because one day you come to work and your key doesn't work, and it's like, I got to drive to the next town and get a job. But I've been fortunate to spend my entire life here in my hometown with my family. And I retired a couple of years ago, came out of retirement to come back to the original radio station I learned broadcasting in high school, which is KBPS. So now I'm the operations manager.
That's really cool. So what is that like, being back at that school, seeing it from the adult perspective versus maybe when you were there originally starting out?
It's different because, of course, I'm older now.
Seasoned.
They listen to different music, of course. And when I did start there back in the 74, the technology, we played records on the radio, and people today are like, that's kind of cool. That's like antique. It's like, well, it wasn't antique when I was playing it on the radio. It was the vinyl was pretty advanced technology back in then. And then, we went into the digital era, the cassettes, and came out of 8-track. And so everything's digital today, like what we're doing today. Yeah. And that's a big change. The other thing is the students have changed a little bit too. Time goes on, people move on. So it's nice to go back there. And I have kids and grandkids, and to see these young people, and that's the reason that I am at that back at the broadcast station, is because I want to give back. Mm. I spent my entire life, and I owe a lot of that to the broadcast program. And you go through life and you just want to, it's all about me. It's like, how much money can I make? How many trophies and awards can I make? How fast can I move up the corporate chain? And then you get to the top or wherever your goal was. And then you look back and you just go, does it really matter? But what really matters is the legacy you leave behind. And are you going to help the next generation? You're going to pour into people, or you're going to give of yourself. And I think that's what really is a great legacy. And that's really why I'm back, is I want to just pour into the broadcast program, maybe help uplift some of the students there, give them encouragement like I got when I was there.
Yeah.
And so that hasn't changed, but the technology has changed.
I love that. That's awesome. I love hearing how someone kind of gets to go back full circle to really see where they started, but also to be able to give back and to pass it along. Because I'm sure there were people in your life that really instilled confidence in you to be able to be where you are today. So you grew up in Prineville. What was life like for you as a child? Like, I think most people, when they think about childhood, they think, oh, maybe there's some difficulties here and there. But because of the time that you grew up, there was some pretty harsh prejudice against you. What was life like early childhood wise?
Well, I was born in Prineville. We moved around a lot. My father and mother were born here in Milwaukee, Oregon. My grandparents came from Hiroshima, Japan back in the 20s to pursue a better life. And then, of course, we know what happened in the 30s and 40s, the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And so there was a lot of animosity towards Japanese Americans and Asian people. And so I grew up in the 60s. And so my father, he ended up, my parents were imprisoned in the internment camps. They were basically prison camps with barbed wire fences and everything. So they were scooped up. They had 5 days to sell everything. They were moved to these makeshift camps out in the middle of the desert. And they really didn't know what was going on because they were born here. They were Americans. They were like, why are we being, rounded up and put in these camps? So my father ended up volunteering for the Army. And they had a separate Army. It was a Regiment 442, and it was all 20,000 Japanese Americans, and they fought in Europe. So they were fighting in a separate unit because they really didn't have a lot of trust at that point.
Yeah.
And so when my father came back, they were in the camps for 4 years. He started drinking real heavily. And I'm the youngest of 7 kids. And my mother, at that point, there was a lot of abuse, a lot of physical abuse, a lot of alcoholism. We moved from town to town in the central area. We lived in Prineville, Heppner, Condon. And so my mother decided after all this abuse, she was just going to leave. So she left and moved all of us to Portland. And I was not quite 1 at that point.
Oh, wow.
And my mother told me the reason the last straw is when I was a young infant, that I got real sick. And she wanted to take me to the doctor. And my father said no, because it cost too much money. And so she waited until he drank and passed out. She called the doctor. He came, and I had pneumonia, and he said that if I would have waited till the morning, I would have died. And to this day, I have asthma and a lot of breathing issues because of that. So my mother said, that's it, I'm leaving. Moved the whole family to Portland back in 1961. And she basically raised all the kids, I'm the youngest, by herself. And she did that by working 7 days a week. She was a waitress. She was a cook. She was a maid. We picked berries. And me being the youngest, she took me everywhere with her. So her bosses, they felt sorry for her because she was a single mom, and which was kind of unheard of back in the 60s. And so she would just bring me with her. And I learned how to make beds and stand on plastic carts and wash dishes in the back of restaurants. And that's where it all started for me. It's just a great work ethic. It was a tragic time in my life. And then you were talking about the prejudice part of it. I didn't really understand what prejudice was back then, because when you're 4 or 5 years old, you think everybody's the same. I mean, a prejudice, I believe, is a learned trait. Because you can take kids of any nationality or kids with disabilities and put them together. They're not going to know the difference when they're 4 or 5 years old. They're just going to be happy they have a friend to play with. when it really came clear to me is when I was invited to a little kid down the street in Southeast Portland. He invited me to a slumber party, and he said, "I'm going to have a birthday party. You want to come? Bring your pillow." And so I told my mom, "I'm so excited. I have friends." And I went down there with my pillow. His mom looked at me at the door like, he's, who's this kid? So we got to eat pizza. We played, and then she said, "Richard, it's time for you to go home." And I'm like 5 or 6 at that time, and I'm thinking like, I went home with my pillow. My mom said, "Why are you here?" And I go, his mom told me to leave, and she goes, "Did she tell the other kids to leave?" I said, "No." And so my mom knew kind of what that was, and she started trying to explain to me why these things were happening to me. So I kind of knew at an early age that I looked different, even though I was born here and I didn't speak Japanese language or anything. I thought I was the same as everybody else. But early on in my life, I knew that I'm a little different. I look different. Yeah. People are going to start treating me differently. And that was back in the 60s. Today, it's a little different. I mean, thank goodness. But
yeah. Man, your mom has been such a pinnacle role model in your life, a tremendous amount of influence. And I'm curious some of the lessons that you've gained from having her as your mom. In fact, I remember you saying that she was the perfect mom for you. And I'm going to ask you a little bit later, a little bit more about that. But there was a time I recall you talking about where, your mother would make dinner for all of you and everyone would be eating and she wouldn't be eating. And you'd say, "Mom, aren't you going to eat?" And she said, "No, I'm not hungry right now." And you would hear her later on crying behind a door. And the level of sacrifice that your mom showed you is just absolutely astounding in her work ethic. But I'm curious, what are some of those other lessons that you can recall of her teaching you, whether that was being taught or whether that was being caught just by the way that she presented herself?
I think just me growing up as a young child and observing her and not having a father. She was my mother and father. So I didn't have like the dad saying, "Okay, it's okay to have a cookie," and the mom saying no. I didn't have that confusion going on. I had one person that was in my life that was the beacon, and I just observed her the whole time. Like you mentioned, her crying in the bathroom because she was a waitress. She would have her apron and cry when she saw the bills come in. She knew that she didn't have enough money to pay, and I would go as a little child, "Mama, why are you crying? Don't cry, don't cry." Little 5, 6, 7-year-old kid doesn't understand why you're crying. They just want it to stop. And so she started going into the bathroom and crying, but I could listen in the door, little fingers coming underneath the door, and I could hear her crying, and I didn't understand that. She taught me how to love people, rich or poor or any color, handicapped, people that look different than me. She loved everybody. She didn't have a whole lot, but if somebody came to the door, it didn't matter what religion, what race they were, they needed a cup of sugar, and it was the last cup of sugar, she would give it to them, or she'd tell me to take it over to them. So I observed that at a very young age, and I reflect back now as I'm older, and I'm thinking all these things that I learned, but it was just I observed it. It was normal to me.
Yeah.
This is even though the world around me sometimes displayed prejudice and that, but my mother always made me feel valuable. She made me feel like she just never held a grudge and like we dislike these people because they dislike us. She just moved forward, worked hard. She had a lot of pride in her family. She never owned a home, barely owned a car. When she passed, I managed her checking account, and she had $27 in her checking account when she passed. I think all of us, if we were, hopefully we wouldn't pass now, but if we did, we'd probably have more than $27 in a checking account.
Yeah.
So that's how hard my mom worked, 7 days a week, many hours a day, and that's all she had. But she had her kids, and that's what she was most proud of. So now I'm proud of my kids, my grandkids, and she instilled me to look further beyond materialistic things and money and race.
Yeah.
And, so those are just valuable lessons.
Yeah. And they're valuable lessons, I think, that everyone could benefit from going back and learning nowadays. Because I don't feel like a lot of, I won't say youth, I'm going to say just a general blanket statement. A lot of people within the last 30 or 40 years have kind of lost that ability to care for other people. And that's, like what you said, prejudice is learned. It's not something that's instilled in you. And looking around, especially, we're in an election year right now, and you hear that someone is voting this way or they believe that, and all of a sudden, like, people will defriend you or they'll spit vitriol at you, whatever it is. And we got to come back to this place of loving people where they are, whatever they're going through, whatever, religion or background or color, skin, whatever it is. We have to get back to this place of seeing people, as a human race, right? Yeah, I'm curious, who were you in high school? Like, you kind of alluded to this before we kind of jumped on of you were kind of the jokester. I would imagine that may not have played well for you in high school
or grade school
or grade school, any school. Who was Rick growing up? Like, what was your identity?
When I was in grade school, before I went into high school and radio, I talked a lot. I mean, I was the kid in the back that the teacher would say, you're talking too much. And my mother saved one of my report cards. Back in the day, you got a real report card and A, B, C, and then they'd write a teacher comment. And on that teacher comment, she wrote, "Richard is a very nice young man, but his biggest problem is that he talks too much. And if he doesn't stop talking and start paying attention in his class, he'll never amount to anything." And she wrote that on there. I mean, you couldn't do that today in the school, right?
Yeah, you get fired.
But my mother saved that, and it was in her file cabinet when she passed. She had a little tin file cabinet, and I was looking at that, and I started laughing because I thought, that was me in grade school. Then I went into high school at 14. I got on the radio, and I made my entire life talking. When she told me that I talked too much. And I just thought that was kind of funny so then I get into high school and I got into radio and I was a little shy. I was comfortable around a couple of friends that I had, but I was really shy because I was still trying not to bring too much attention to myself because I didn't want people to say, "There's the Asian kid and his family bombed Pearl Harbor," and all that stuff, right? So, and so I just, backed away. But then when I got into radio, way before the internet, they couldn't see who you were. So, it was just the audio medium. So I could be anything I wanted. So I didn't have to worry about people judging me for a skin color or race. And so that was why radio was a good choice for me back then. Today, if you get into broadcasting, there's the internet, there's podcasts, and they know what you look like and everything else. But back then, that's why I didn't use my real name. The radio station that I worked at said, you can't use your real name. And I said, why? And they go, because people hate Japanese. That's what he said. And they gave me the names that I would use. And I'd go like, okay, it just made sense to me. And then I got into radio and I became popular. I started making really good money. By the time I was 16, I was buying brand new cars, coming from a very poor family where we lived in a house with 3 families, and my mother never owned a car or a house or anything. I'm 16, I'm on the radio, and I'm making good money, and I'm walking into car dealerships, and I'm saying, I want to buy that new sports car, and they're like, "You're a kid." I'm like, I've got the money. Yeah. And so B of A was Benjamin Franklin back then, and Bob Hazen was the president, and he was at the branch by my house. And so I'd say, call Bob Hazen at Benjamin Franklin, and he'll clear the money for me because I was 16. And they're like, "You can't buy a car at 16. So I'd have to have my mom sign, but I would pay for it because I was making really good money. And so that took me to another level. And how I explain that is, if you ever saw the movie Jerry Lewis and the Nutty Professor.
Yeah.
So he's this nutty professor guy with glasses, and he's kind of shy, and he's bumping into things, and then he drinks that stuff in the lab, and he becomes this confident guy with a jacket, and he's like, "Hey, how you doing, baby? Get in the car." That was me, because I was put down so much in my life that all of a sudden now I'm on the radio, and I'm famous, kind of famous, locally famous, and making good money, buying new cars, driving to school. People are like, "Who's this 16-year-old kid with a brand new 280ZX?" And I'm like, I embrace this new image, and I was like this bigger than life person who, it wasn't really me. I'm really that shy guy underneath. So it was a transformation. I didn't like that person. And there's a lot of things that, went haywire as I went through life and I navigated through life and, divorce and things like that. Because I thought, I'm better than everybody now. Before I wasn't good enough for anybody. Now I'm better than everybody. So, what I say is true and what you say is not true. And it's a very dangerous place to go into when you grow up, not having any confidence in yourself. And even though my mom instilled everything she could into me, the world was telling me, you're this or you're that. And then when I got into radio, then I could put on the clown mask. The reason I say it's clown mask because I could pretend I was somebody else. There was no internet, there was nothing, so I could be this bigger than life guy with a big voice and get radio stations to hire me and pay me good money, and I could drive nice cars and act like I was a rich guy, and I was the nutty professor, and I went through that for many years, and I didn't like that, but it was just like I felt like I've arrived, but you don't arrive. You need to stay humble, and it was definitely a teaching and learning moment for me.
Interesting. The idea we've heard, I'm sure you've probably heard this before, money changes people. And while I can see that in some ways, I've also kind of subscribed to the idea that money amplifies who you are. When you're poor and you don't have much, those small little idiosyncrasies that you grab onto and maybe you shouldn't be doing, they can't get that big because you can't afford to get yourself in too much trouble. But as you gain more income, possibilities open up. And there are aspects of us that start to grow and become bigger than maybe we want them to be. Was there a point in your life, like financially, where maybe the bottom kind of fell out and you're like, man, like I've got everything that I could possibly want right now, but I'm so unhappy. And if that has happened, what was the transition? What was the shift for you to kind of come back to almost taking that clown face off?
It happened to me a couple of times, going back and forth to these different identities. I remember when I was like 20 years old, and I had everything anybody could want. I mean, I had 2 cars, 2 motorcycles. I had a jet boat. I was living down at McCormick Pier on the river. I could walk out and get in my jet boat and take people skiing. And this is a poor kid. And I just remember having lots of people that I could go out with and date and people, but it was fake because they were attached to the celebrity, and I didn't feel like they knew me. So I was really unhappy. And I remember coming home late one night and just being out in the clubs and partying and drinking and stuff like that. And I was so unhappy, and I just laid down on my couch and I just looked up to the ceiling and I said, like, I have everything that I've wanted that I thought would make me happy, and I'm miserable. And I remember looking over onto the shelf, and there was a little white Bible that somebody had given me, and I just started bawling. And I fell asleep because I'd been out partying and stuff. I woke up the next day, and the sunlight's coming through the window, and I'm just like, oh wow, it was a bad dream or whatever. And I saw that white Bible. I still have it to this day. And I opened it up, and it was a King James, and I started reading it, but I didn't understand it because it's King James. And I'm thinking like, well, maybe this is not for me. So I got in my car and I drove around. It was like on a Monday or Tuesday, and I drove around to every church I could to see if there was somebody in the church that could explain this to me.
Someone translate this, please.
Yeah, because I thought I saw the light, I saw the white Bible, and I opened it up, and I'm like, it's gibberish, And I remember I just went to every church I could and knock on the door. They were all locked, and I went to like 2 or 3 churches. I went to a Mormon church, and I remember thinking like, man, their lawn is like really nice. It looks like a golf course, and that door was locked. And I just went to every church I could, and that was my first attempt of like, thinking I'm miserable, the materialistic things are not making me happy. And so I kind of gave up on that because the doors were locked.
And must be a sign from God.
Yeah, and then I went back to my old ways. And it wasn't until I got married, I thought like, okay, I need to have that happy life I never had. I need to have children. I need to have a wife. I need to have the white picket fence and the kids sitting around the table. And asking me to help them with their Legos and Lincoln Logs and everything. So I got married, right away, and I started having kids. I had 2 beautiful kids, and after 7 years, I'm thinking, I don't know how to be a dad. I don't, I grew up in an environment where there was alcohol and abuse and desertion and I just felt all this desertion in my life, and I somehow you'd go back to that and you're thinking like, if all this pain is bad, then run. So I ran, and I got a divorce after 7 years, and I thought like, okay, that didn't make me happy, the white picket fence and the family, and so I ran away from that, got back into my life as the nutty professor, and I'm going back and forth, and I'm thinking, there one side or the other side, it's miserable. So it took me many, many years and another divorce, unfortunately, to figure out, okay, it's not about me. It's about something bigger than me.
Yeah.
The solution was always there. I just didn't know it. And I used excuses not to heal myself to something bigger than myself. But as you get older, you realize it's not about you. It's about something bigger than you.
Well, it's interesting too, because there's so many people, because there are people that don't believe in God, and they seem to have a pretty decent life, and they seem happy. And you kind of look at them, you go, well, what is it about them that makes them happy? And what I have found is the people that are happiest in the world are the ones that are constantly pouring out their cup. They're constantly volunteering. They're constantly giving things away. I've heard it said you can't outgive God. And it's true though. The people that are the happiest that I know are the people that are constantly giving of time, giving of resources, and they're constantly using their gifts to help other people. What were some of those gifts that you've discovered in your life that you've been given? Obviously, an oratory gift of being able to speak. I would say storyteller. For all of you guys listening, you can tell he's a really gifted storyteller. What are some of those gifts that you have been able to use to add value to other people over the years?
Well, I think one of them is what I'm doing right now, and that's going back to my old high school and pouring into the young people of our future, because they're, our young people, there's a lot of them. When I was growing up, divorce wasn't real common. A single mom wasn't very common, but today, unfortunately, it is common. And so there are young people out there that may need to hear my story, that may need to go like, okay, he's done it. It's taken him many, many years to figure out you're not that bad. It's going to be okay, Yeah. So I feel I can touch people like that. I tend to look at people that, I think we talked earlier, that the people that don't get enough credit, the waitresses, the person that pumps your gas, those are the people I notice the most. I mean, I've spent so much of my life in the celebrity world, and I've been on yachts. I've stayed at celebrities' homes, and I've seen millionaires and billionaires. And to me, I'm more gravitate towards the people that don't have anything. I think it goes back to where I started from. So I try and always go into and reach out to those people and say, hi, my name is Rick. What's your name? How's your day? And they're a little surprised that, why is this person interested in me? Because most people don't talk to me when I pump their gas or bring them food or water. And the other thing is, some people think of people like waitresses and waiters and dishwashers as servants. It's like, hey, get me more water. It's like, there's a polite way of saying that. Yeah. Hey, when you get a moment, would you mind bringing me another cup of water? Yeah, and they bring it to you. Thank you so much. I mean, it's a small thing, but I think it's the most important thing. I think we need to really pour love into people that really need it. I mean, we all need it, but there are people that maybe need it a little more than others. And that's what I've learned in my many years.
Yeah. I love that. It reminds me of a story. My wife and I, we had been married for probably maybe a year, and we frequented this burger restaurant quite often. And we went in, and they had this strawberry lemonade that was just to die for. It was bottomless. And so we would go in, and I would always order one of these things. And it was getting to the end of our meal, and I noticed that our server, he was making sure that I was getting my fill of strawberry lemonade. Like, this kid was amazing. And and I remember right before he brought the check, he said, can I get you one more? And I said, oh, I don't think I'll be able to finish it before I leave, so it's okay. So he walked off, he went to grab the check, and when he came back, he brought me the largest to-go cup that they had filled with this strawberry lemonade. And so I paid the bill, and I looked at him. I said, hey, could I talk to your manager, please? He said, yeah, no problem. And he had probably been working there for maybe a month or two. Manager came out, and, you know, as most servers do, when someone says, can I speak to the manager, like 9 times out of 10, it's usually some kind of complaint or service issue. And so the manager came out, oh, you know, what can we do? And I said, I just wanted to let you know that you have like a gold star in your hand. You need to put them on a fast track to management. That was all I said. And I just said, this is the best service that I've ever come. You know, we come here fairly often. This is the best service we've ever gotten. Like, you need to keep your eye on him. Well, we came back about 2 months later, and he was in training for management.
Oh, that's great.
Like, it's those small little things that we think it's so minuscule, but to recognize someone where they are, to edify them, and then also to lift them up in some way. And there's countless stories that you and I could probably both go back and forth with from people, the bellhops at.
Right. Yeah.
There's a bellhop that's in Florida that I know as coffee order, and I've gotten him coffee a number of years, and we know each other by name. And there's something about going that extra distance to see people that truly makes connection powerful. What are some of those powerful connections? Like, what has connecting with people done for you in your life? I would imagine it's helped you open doors to bigger and better things, but also to maybe better connections, deeper connections with people.
Mm-hmm. Well, before, when I was younger, the connections, we all have a choice to who we want to connect with. They were self-serving connections. It was like, okay, you know, what can you do for me? You're the boss, so maybe I can bring you, you know, a coffee or whatever. And as I've gotten older, it's like, again, you know, we go back to the people that need it the most, and you don't need anything from them because there's nothing they can do for you, you know. So you're just giving, and that's a grateful heart, giving that. And I learned that also in the music business, being involved with many of the big stars. I won't mention their names, but their record labels and their managers. In the beginning, when you're in a powerful position to help excel their career, play their records, promote their shows, they're going to come into you like, Nathan, what a great job. Hey, how you doing? But the minute you are out of the industry or you're not in a power position, you can't even get a call back. You can't get a text message. Even, you know, if something bad would happen, like you lost a loved one, and before you thought you had a connection with them. So that opened up my eyes that, you know, what's a true connection? You know, sometimes we connect with people that we want to, but deep down inside, it's like, well, I want to connect with that person for a reason. I mean, it doesn't, you shouldn't feel bad about that because that's human nature. You know, like, is it going to help me in my career, my family, financially? But we need to reach out and connect with people that have nothing to give us. There's nothing. I want to just pour into you. You know, I want to help you become the manager. Yeah. Even though you're not going to give me a extra cup of lemonade, but I just want to pour into you. And I think that makes me feel good, is that I'm just trying to serve and expecting nothing in return. And that's what I've learned in my life. Is before it was more self-serving. It was like, okay, I could be friends with you and connect with you and network with you, you know, because it's important. Yeah. But if I'm just your neighbor walking my dog, you know, I can't help your career. Why can't I connect with him? You know. Yeah. So that's really what I've learned in my life as far as connection.
Yeah. So I want to ask you kind of a two-pronged question. You've had the opportunity to meet with some pretty high caliber people, from, you know, music industry stars, movie stars, a couple presidents. There have been some, I would say, I was going to say OGs in the broadcasting world, people that you would hear their name and you go, oh my goodness, you've had time with that person one-on-one to talk with them. I'm curious what, you don't have to mention names, but what would be like maybe 1 or 2 lessons from someone from that side of the railroad tracks? And I'm curious, on the other side of the railroad tracks, someone that maybe might have been overlooked or maybe still is overlooked to this day, that they've taught you something that's so impactful that you still carry that to this day. Mm-hmm. So what would be a lesson from both sides of those things that you've learned over the years?
One person is, and I'll mention his name, is Kenny Rogers. Kenny Rogers, if you don't know who he is, I mean, I know you do, but...
You're under a rock. Get out from under the rock.
Yeah, he started out in rock with Kenny Rogers in the first edition, and then he was in acting with the Gambler movies. Then he had a successful solo career in country. He was doing duets with Dolly Parton. I mean, the guy is amazing. He had restaurants with his name on it. But I've had a few opportunities to sit down with Kenny and have dinner and spend time. And I asked him one time, I said, what advice do you give young people that are trying to pursue a career? And I know they reach out to you because you've done everything. And he goes, it's real simple. He goes, I just tell them to be nice to the people on the way up because you're going to see them on the way down. Mm-hmm. He goes, if you don't think that you're going to find yourself going up and down in your career or in your life, he goes, you're wrong, because that's the way life is. It's up and down. And he goes, that's the most important thing. He goes, because the people, as you're going up, you're going to see them on the way down. And to me, it was very simple, and we've heard that before. But to hear it from somebody that's achieved such world recognition like Kenny Rogers, and just be in conversation with him, he's like, that's the advice I have. The other thing is he shared with me when he was with the first edition, is in like 1970, before Elvis passed away, he was opening for Elvis in Las Vegas, because it was a big thing. If you ever YouTube it, Elvis took over Las Vegas and everything. They were wearing Elvis hats and everything. And he said that they opened up for Elvis, and they were up in the big presidential suite, and his band and Elvis's band, they were like, hey, let's go down to the casino and let's go have some fun. And they were like, yeah. And so Kenny was going to go, and his band was going to go, Elvis's band. And they said, Elvis, come on, let's go. And Kenny said, I was standing there in the door, and Elvis said, no, man, you guys go out there and you have fun. I don't want to cause a scene. You guys go have fun. And Kenny's like, really? He goes, yeah, go out and have fun. And Kenny was the last guy to close the door, and he looked back, and he looked at Elvis, and he said, I saw the saddest person in the world, the most famous person and the saddest person I've ever seen. And he goes, I want to be successful, I want to be famous, but I never want to be that famous. And I thought, wow, a little insight from somebody that, I think everybody knows Elvis, but he recognized back then, just before Elvis passed, that he goes, I saw the most famous person in the world and the saddest person in the world. So that's always been in the back of my mind.
Famous but disconnected.
Yeah, he was so famous he couldn't walk the streets. He couldn't do normal things like, us, and go down and get a coffee at Starbucks or something like that. He would create a scene, so he had to be so isolated. And I'm sure when he was starting out, he was thinking like, I want all that fame. I want it. And you get it, and you're at the top, and you're going like, I'm miserable.
You don't realize what you have to sacrifice in order to be there, and not even just stay there, but even childhood stars who have in their youth done something amazing, and they can't walk out because people remember them. So that's really powerful.
And then the other one, his name is Jimmy Wayne, and he was a country singer, and he still sings. He's a motivational speaker. If you look him up, Jimmy Wayne is his name, and he's an outstanding guy. We've been friends many, many years. He's done so many great things for me. He's helped me with charities. The one thing I'm most proud of in my career is that I got to use my celebrity or popularity, whatever you want to call it, to help charities that I was passionate about, cancer research and kids at Dornbecker and that kind of thing. And Jimmy has helped me through the years, and to this day, he goes around. He's a motivational speaker. He wrote a book, and we stay in contact, and we send encouraging messages back and forth. And he's an amazing guy. He's one of those guys where I was talking about people when they need something from you, and then they're your best friend. Then when you can't, you're not in a power of influence, then they don't return your phone call or anything. Jimmy has always been there for me from the beginning. So I just cherish that relationship from a guy that has had great success. He's written books. He tours around the country. He's a motivational speaker, and he'll talk to anybody. I mean, anybody could email him. I guarantee you he'll email you back. Wow. And he's a special person.
Wow. That's absolutely amazing. I have loved our time so much. You are such a wealth of knowledge, and getting to understand your story, the lessons, the people that you've been around has just been really amazing. Before we kind of finish up here, I want to remind all of you guys, take a moment, subscribe, share this podcast, share this episode with a friend, because there's someone that needs to hear exactly what Rick is talking about right now. There's someone in your world that feels disconnected, and there are things that they can do, exactly what Rick was talking about, of how they can be serving others, how they can get connected with other people. You don't have to do this life alone. So share this with someone, make a difference in someone's life. Man, there's so many different questions that are going on in my head of what I want to ask you to kind of wrap up our time together. There are a lot of broken families that we have in the world today, and you've experienced it on both sides of it. I'm curious from the father's side. I have a lot of friends who have made mistakes in their marriages, and because of those mistakes, their children are distant from them. And I don't know how close you are with your children, or if that was ever strained, but I'm curious, how do you build that relationship with your children when you've maybe caused distrust with them? How do you get to a place where you can live life? Because I would imagine you love your grandkids so much. You also love your kids immensely. What's the process to getting back to a place of reconciliation with your kids? Maybe, and by the way, this doesn't have to necessarily be a divorce thing. This could be anything that happens. You know, some people, their fathers never show up at a baseball game or their recital, and they loathe their father for this, and they are unforgiving towards us. So I'm curious, from the father side, how do you extend across to create that connection with your kids?
I think what it is because we're emotional people. When you go through a breakup, a relationship, a divorce, or anything, there's high emotions. And especially when you're dealing in a court system, then it becomes a legal issue, it becomes a property and all this other stuff. And you've got to get way past that and realize that the kids, that doesn't matter to them. They just know they have a mom and a dad that aren't getting along. So what I've done is reach across the aisle and speak nothing but highly about their mom. And even to this day, I mean, my ex-wife, Jason Janet's mom, we're the best of friends. There are times that she'll do something and I'll just explain how proud I am of her, and I'll start tearing up. And she's my ex-wife and she's remarried, but my kids see that and they know that I have the utmost respect for her, even though we broke up and it was bad and it hurt. But I think the disconnect is when the parents hate each other and they can't come together, it affects the children. So I think even if it's hard, and I understand that, but you got to find a way, you know, and you got to find a way to bring that back together. You don't have to be the best of friends, but you need to get tamp down that hate and really realize that it's just emotions, and realize, you know, that the kids are still going to have a mother or a father, or, you know, and I think that's important. And I think that I've seen that effect in my kids. And for some reason, you know, divorce is not a great thing, but they've managed that really well through the years, because she speaks highly of me, I speak highly of her, and it's genuine. And it took us a while to get to that point. Yeah. Because in the beginning it was lawyers and lawyers and lawyers, and they were saying bad. But once you get through it, you go through, and that's what the kids are going to see. They're not going to see the materialistic things and all the lawyer stuff, and, you know, they're going to want to see, you know, it's a learning experience, and you can't just tell them about it. You need to show them, you know, with your actions. Yeah. And to this day, if she were sitting here, I could tell you a million things why she's so wonderful. I mean, I wish I would have known that when we were married. And that's why I think maybe sometimes counseling is good, because I never knew what a good marriage looked like. I came from a broken home. And so all I had was all this, you know, this abandonment. And I didn't even know I had it. But my actions showed it later on as I look back at my life. But if I could go back in time and know what I know now, I think I could really uplift and see the greatness in my ex-wife, you know. And I tell her now, so it's not too late. You can still go back, and you can't rebuild that marriage, but you can go back and rebuild the relationship.
Man, that is so powerful, and I think so many people could benefit from that, especially today. Just where your focus goes, that's where your energy is going to flow, right? And just the fact of getting, like what you said, getting past the lawyers, getting past all the legal stuff, and be able to look at the person and find the good in them. And that's the big thing. Well, we don't look for the good in people, we look for the bad. And whatever you're looking for, you're going to find it. And so I absolutely love that. That is something to take to the bank. For all of you listening, thank you so much for tuning in. Share this episode with a friend. And until next time, remember to be more, see more, and experience more in the forest.